So, I never thought I'd make a video about books. I'll just straight up say that. I am not much of a reader at all. I mean, as you could probably tell from the video title, I'm kind of a reading noob, I guess. But yeah, so after I saw Dune Part 2, I loved it so much that I said, you know what? I'm going to read Dune. I bought the first book a couple of years ago after the first movie came out because I also loved that one, and I really just couldn't get into it at the time. But after Dune Part 2, I was like, you know what? Let's give it a second shot. And I ended up reading 4 books. So, maybe I am a reader. I don't know. Either way, welcome to my channel. Here I mostly make YouTube shorts and all those kind of things. Mostly about, like, Star Wars and that kind of stuff. But I decided it would be interesting to give a non-reader's perspective on the Dune saga. So the books we're going to be talking about today are Dune, Dune Messiah, Children of Dune, and last but not least, God Emperor of Dune. Now, keep in mind, there are going to be spoilers for all 4 of these books, but, you know, they've been out for like 40, 50 years at this point. So if you haven't read them, I wouldn't recommend watching this necessarily, so, yeah. Just kidding. You're welcome to stay if you'd like, but I just highly advise just reading the books, because first off, they're really good. Second, it's best to go when the thing's cold. So let's just get started with Dune. So Dune is the first book in the series, of course, and it is considered by many to be one of, if not the greatest science fiction novel ever written. And I can see why. This is an excellent story. Frank Herbert built an incredible world in this book. The culture feels so alive, especially with the Fremen. The characters are very well developed. There's a lot of intrigue that wasn't really in the movie that I really enjoyed in the book, especially with Thufir Hawat thinking Lady Jessica was the spy among them. The story is both fascinating and complex. It is very interesting. Like, I was pretty much never bored while reading this, and this is like an 800-page book, so I was really impressed by that. So yeah, I'm not sure how much I can really add to the conversation because everyone knows about Dune. Because a lot of people have read Dune, I'm not sure how much I can add to the conversation. All I'm going to say is it's a classic, it's a fantastic read, and it's something that I really enjoyed. Alright, so now let's talk about one of the more controversial books in the series, Dune Messiah. I'll be honest, I love this book. I really did. I think a lot of people misinterpret it. I think it's excellent.
On every level.
So first off, this is a much shorter read than the first book. It's like less than half the length. But it didn't feel like a rushed story. It just felt like something that was a little bit smaller in scale. And it didn't require the massive length that the first Dune book did. I love the political thriller story. I thought that was really cool and a good way to take things. And I love how it expanded upon the meaning of the first book that Paul Atreides was not a hero. I believe he mentioned he killed 61 billion people in this book, which is kind of wild. This is a great book, maybe even my favorite of the 4 that I read. So take from that what you will. Usually it takes me about a week to read a book. I read this thing in like 2 days because I was just so into it. So yeah, highly recommend Dune Messiah. Can't say enough good about it. So now next up in the series is Children of Dune. This is the first book in the series that Paul is not the main character. Rather, it focuses on his children, Leto II and Ghanima, and they're both fascinating characters, and this book is a very good read. I didn't like it as much as the first 2 books, because I thought it started out a little slow. In general, it's kind of a slow read. It's still very entertaining, though. Leto II in particular is just a fascinating character, and we'll get more into him in God Emperor, of course. But I still was very invested in his story. I also thought this had some nice parallels to the first Dune, with Leto II going out into the desert, albeit of his own free will and not just because there was a Harkonnen attack or whatever. Alia's possession by the Baron I thought was very interesting and compelling, and Paul being the creature was predictable, but it led to some really nice scenes. I really liked his dialogue with Leto. I thought that was some really cool philosophical kind of stuff. Really interesting. Like I said, it does kind of start out slow, and what was up with the beef swelling scene? That was like super weird. Like, good book. I don't know what Frank Herbert was cooking with the beef swelling scene, though. That was just weird. Outside of that, this is still a very good book that I would recommend. And last but not least, we have the strangest book to this point in the series, God Emperor of Dune. God Emperor of Dune is set 3,500 years after Children of Dune. Focuses on Leto II, and he's not a human anymore. He's just a freaking worm guy, like a 20-foot long worm guy or something, and it's just like, what? When I first read that this book had that big of a time jump, I was really nervous, but this book is great. It really is. Leto is a fascinating character in this book. I think some of his philosophical rants get kind of like pretentious and a bit bothersome at times just because there's so many of them. But it's still very interesting to hear his perspective. I was really invested in the whole story of the Golden Path as well. Also, this book is Would You Love Me If I Was a Were before TikTok. I will say these newer characters didn't grip me as much as the old ones, because in the original trilogy you had great characters like Gurney Halleck and Stilgar, Lady Jessica. Here, outside of Leto II, I wasn't as invested in these characters as I was in the original 3 books. But yeah, this is a very interesting book. I really liked the whole plot with Siona and Duncan, and them eventually teaming up to defeat Leto. There was another weird scene here that was like almost as weird as the beef swelling scene. Maybe not quite on that level. Beef swelling is kind of in a league of its own. But there was the scene where Duncan's climbing the wall or whatever, and Nayla's just more than oogling over him, let's say, and I'm like, what? I'm convinced Frank Herbert was high while writing this book, for better or for worse, but it's a very investing read. I really liked it. Now I want to take a quick minute or so just to rate these books. So number 4 is Children of Dune. I liked it, but it didn't engross me quite as much as the other ones that I read. Still a very good book, though. Number 3, I would say God Emperor of Dune. The supporting cast didn't invest me as much as it did for the first 3 books, but Leto II is a fascinating character and one that was probably extremely hard to write, and I can't help but respect that. Very interesting book. I'm going to like flip-flop these ones a little bit, I'm going to be honest, because it could really go either way. But right now I'm going to go with Dune, the first book, because it just has such an iconic story. The world feels very lived in. Frank Herbert did a masterful job writing this. And number 1 for me, Dune Messiah. I know a lot of people don't really like this one that much, but I love it. It's such an interesting story. It's a great companion piece, epilogue to Dune. I couldn't put this book down. Simply put, I just couldn't put it down. With the other books, I didn't have such a hard time with that. This one I did, so I'm just going to put it at number 1 because I like it a lot. And yeah, that's the entire video. I hope you enjoyed. If you did, please subscribe. And if you want me to read Heretics and Chapter House, I've been kind of on the fence about reading those, to say the least. I'm willing to give them a shot if you guys want me to. And yeah, I'll see you later.